Welcome to the Edifice Complex, the Property Design and Development Podcast. Let your hosts Adam Muggleton and Robert Bean keep you up with who is innovating and doing great work, perspective on the adjacent possible, and challenges to the status quo.
Welcome to the Edifice Complex. I'm Robert Bean, your co-host and unofficial mediator, here with my colleague, official agitator. Again, heavy emphasis on agitator. Friend and Yoda of most everything to do with buildings, Mr. Sir Adam Muggleton. Say hello.
Hello there. Yes, I am an agitator, also known as angry old man. Anyway, looking forward to this because Elizabeth tends to calm me down a bit. So let's get it.
Right. So today's guest earned a degree in chemical engineering from the University of Iowa, and then a master's degree in environmental engineering from Imperial College London in the UK. I want to point that out because we do have London, Ontario here. But no, this is in the UK, and where she pursued opportunities that fueled her passion for sustainability and environmental management. In addition to her degrees, she has earned several certifications through Bream and Well and other organizations. Having spent a few years developing her chops at places like Atkins Realis and Multiconsult, her present-day hideout is AESG. Go team. And they clearly saw an ability to keep her eyes on the target and develop strategies and tactics that resonate with her and the team at AESG. So welcome to the show, Elisabeth Montgomerie.
Thank you. Thank you.
Elizabeth, if I, just looking at your resume, your LinkedIn resume, if I was an HR manager looking to fill a position in sustainability and environmental management, and your resume came across my desk, I would probably throw everybody else in the trash bin. When I look at from the time you went into university to the time you are where you are today, it just seems like you've bobbed and weaved your way through to a goal, and you seem to found a place at home with AESG. So what drove you to stay so focused and find out where you are today?
Well, I mean, it's been a bit of you said bobbed and weaved. It has been a bit of a journey as the focus has changed over the years. I would say when I grew up in Norway, so I'm Norwegian, my name used to be Gustafsson. So I felt right at home when I was in Iowa. But contamination and environmental protection was the big focus. Greenpeace was massive, and I was really focused back then on contaminated land. And I really wanted to study, I suppose, biotechnology and how to get bacteria to help us degrade all the contamination that we were really worried about. Because back then you had what they call like dilute and dispersed landfills. There were very little regulation when it came to tanks and the oil tanks in the ground, etc. So there's a massive focus on that. So I I decided to go to the States because I had a boyfriend. So a little bit of a random reason. So he was
that rarely happens.
good tennis player, and he got a scholarship at a college in Iowa. So I thought I could study in Iowa. And because in Norway, we're lucky enough to have our tuition paid for us, they said, okay, you can go study. And they said, what you want to study then is biomedical engineering. This was before the internet. I couldn't Google it, so I took their word for it. Showed up at University of Iowa for my first lecture and found out that biomedical engineering was actually making artificial heart valves and pacemakers. It was like, okay, not quite what I want to do. So they said, well, you can switch majors, but it has to be engineering. So I'm like, okay, chemical, because it was like the closest. I like chemistry, and it was kind of the closest I felt that was going to get me to where I wanted to get in the end. So 4 years later, graduated, definitely didn't want to be a chemical engineer. And then off I popped to Imperial College to do environmental engineering. So that kind of got me back on track. It was all about, landfill, engineering, wastewater, water treatment, and also importantly, like bioremediation and land farming, which I was really interested in. And then I got a job I got a graduate development program with British Gas Technology. They have a massive research facility in Loughborough, where we did loads of research. It is research into new remediation technologies for gasworks wastes. So I kind of became an expert in that. And then, so fast forward, about 14 years later, I've had twins. And I suppose you wanted to talk about, mentioned Adam, they want to talk about women's perspective, so we can get back to that. But being a working mum in the UK, not ideal. So so just thought, why don't I go back to Norway and get a little bit of a better work-life balance? I could be a full-time working mum, not pay an arm and a leg for nursery. So I joined a big sort of multidisciplinary consultancy, Multiconsult, that you mentioned in your intro. They're sort of a bit like Norway is that answer to Atkins. And they said, really impressive contaminated land experience, but where things were headed at that point, the focus had shifted more onto decarbonisation and the net zero agenda. All that was sort of much more in focus. So they said, would you like to switch to sustainable building design? And having done contaminated land for 14 years, I really, really relished the opportunity to make a change. So I do make big decisions. I move countries very easily, and did this change, and have never looked back. I really enjoy being there with the decision makers at the start of the process, being able to have that influence of how can we make this more sustainable, without necessarily adding anything, just making it integrated, sustainability integrated into the design and making it cost effective, making it work for everyone. You got, your developers happy, and the sustainability experts are happy, and bringing that team together. So I think that's where my sort of passion lies, is sort of managing the expectations, I suppose, and the opportunities of the team as a whole.
That's interesting. So, there's a couple of takeaways there for me and for anyone sort of young listening to this, right? No one, you're like me, I accidentally tripped up and wound up where I was, right? There was no big plan. I didn't wake up at 18 and scream, I've got to be a commissioning engineer. Said nobody ever, right? And sustainability is a little bit like that. You sort of zigzag your way into it.
Yeah.
What you did well, I thought, was, you go and do chemical engineering, right? There's a sunk cost of 4 years and God knows how much money in that, right? And then most people I've met who do chemical engineering go, God, I do not want to be a chemical engineer. And they zigzag something else, right? And to leave that sunk cost is hard. So you did well there. You sort of wind up where you wind up. And I love that. I love that zigzag. So, if anyone listening here, your degree doesn't define you. Where you are born and live doesn't define you. You can move. You went from Norway to like the US to UK to Norway. It's a big old world out there, right?
Adam, it wasn't just the US, it was Iowa.
Go Huskers.
Iowa.
I have to say that Iowa City is, you think the Midwest, but Iowa City is actually more European.
Oh, yeah.
It's like,
it's a Scandinavian influence.
Well, I was going to ask you, Elizabeth, because I remember a couple of, my grandma was Norwegian, and I remember one of was it krummerkrakers? The dessert? Like, it's like a rolled up pastry. That was one of the only words I remember, because I remember sitting in the kitchen with her making krummerkrakers. And anyways, so the Midwest, it's all Norwegians and Swedes, like the whole part of that country.
So you got Norwegian ancestors. There's a table somewhere where you guys picked up some village in Norway.
Yeah, and my great granddad was a sea captain. That was his route, was basically Middle Europe, Scottish, UK, and then how he met my Norwegian great grandma. Well, that's another story altogether. But I'm sure aquavit was involved. There was alcohol somewhere. There's a whole bunch of places we could go here, and like Adam already said, like the guts to change and leave behind the sunk cost that you have that's a huge message for those that are listening. my brain went in another direction too, which had to do with government. And so when you were looking at land remediation, because you're right, there was a huge focus back in the day about contaminated soils, and then now things are shifting. Governments are shifting their focus on sustainability. I think that's interesting. What drives governments to change, which then obviously drives change in people's interests and where you want to go? So had the government not changed the sustainability, would you still be stuck? I don't want to say the word stuck. That's probably the wrong word, but would you still be interested in land remediation? Like, was it the government that drove the change in your interest, or was it personally driven, and did that cause the government to change?
I think the government perspective probably changed because, well, they often firefight, don't they?
Right.
So there was a lot of, environmental disasters, I would say, probably in the 80s and early 90s. So like, we need to fix this now. And specifically, I would say in the UK, with all the old coal gasification works, there's so much contamination. But that's mainly been dealt with now. So I would say that contaminated lands, at least in the UK, I'm not sure how it is in North America, but I think there's a big drive there as well. It is mainly under control, and we don't have the dilute and disperse landfills anymore where things are leaching into the drinking water and all that. And then suddenly, I would say probably around that time, sort of late 90s, remember, Al Gore with his film, but suddenly sort of kind of proving that climate change is a thing that humans have caused. I think before then, it was a bit on the fence, like, is this a natural cycle? We're coming out of an ice age still, and things are all warming up, but how much are we actually contributing? And I think we were around that time realizing, or some of us, not all, because there's still some deniers around, but we were realizing that we need to get our act together, and I think with the construction industry, I suppose it's still probably referred to as the 40% industry, 40% of carbon emissions, 40% of waste.
Yeah.
But I think it is a little bit lower now. That was kind of the next big thing. So we've tackled the massive pollution and contamination aspects, and this is the next big thing to tackle.
Mm-hmm.
So it was partly that, and partly also I was a bit sick and tired of standing outside watching the bigger hole in the ground.
Yeah, it's not glamorous, right? It's
not like a mining engineer.
But what you're saying is like the problem's starting to be solved, right? So the big machine sort of looks for the next big problem, I guess, right? Which is sort of climate issues and climate change. I believe in climate change, but the calling it climate change, I think has got to be one of the worst branded decisions ever made. Don Draper would punch you in the face for that. Call it climate change, whoever decided that. It's environmental degradation, it's pollution, right? Yeah. And people need to be confronted with that, I think. But that's a different TED Talk.
Well, what's in it? Because we have people that are going to be listening to this podcast and they're going to be disagreeing with this conversation that we're having. And that's what it's all about, right? Is the debates. And one of the best lectures I ever listened to was a guy out in Nova Scotia, and he grew up the son of a fisherman, but he happened to have this amazing, tool on top of his shoulders, which is his ability to do intellectual work. And so he ended up with three PhDs, one in climatology, oceanography, and geology. And so when you have that kind of intellect, you work for offshore oil and gas, like that's your shtick, right? And he got up in front of a crowd and he said, you know what? Climate over time changes. Temperatures go up, temperatures go down. And, you can debate the whole issue all you like, but at the end of the day, humans do not live up to their intellect. Putting match to fire to a combustible like hydrocarbons for heating buildings just is so stupid. Given our intellectual capacity to be able to use other resources to do low-grade work, why are we doing, such a massive, stupid decisions that we make? And how can you argue with that? So for those that are listening, that maybe you're denying climate change, you can't deny that we are not living up to our intellectual capacity. We're not even close to it. We're way smarter than the way that we behave.
Or just look at the amount of pollution we kick out.
Right.
You can't call me a monster for saying what I just said and then wave your iPhone at me. You're an asshole. Sorry.
Elisabeth, how do you like the show so far?
Johnny?
Obviously, I've been working with Adam for 6 months now.
Anger is real.
Yeah, and I think that, we do have the intellectual capacity, and I think if we turned off the oil taps now, we would very quickly come up with the solutions we needed, to replace that. And we should, and we probably need some oil, for products, plastic.
It's in everything, right?
We can't replace.
Industrial processes.
Why are we burning it? This is a limited resource that, we're going to need for other more valuable things than burning for fuel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think, we need to just, turn the taps off. But I say that coming from, a country who used to be the richest country in the world. No, it's probably top 5. We're still relying on oil, Norway might say that. It's sustainable, but we're not really.
Yeah.
So let's just put that out there for people who are in North America. Norway is a sort of medium-sized country in the Scandics. It is the cold version of the UAE or Qatar. It is an oil economy, the biggest one of the biggest sovereign wealth funds in the world, bar none. They basically own a piece of every business in the world, right?
We do, but because we're a socialist democrat country, we sell ourselves as being much nicer than we really are.
What does Julius Caesar say? Every person tells himself the story they have to tell themselves to get out of bed in the morning and do what they got to do, right?
The Edifice Complex will continue in just a moment.
Are you struggling with paperwork, spreadsheet overload, and project management? Then Blue Rhythm is the solution to help you. Streamline your commissioning and project management process. Go paperless, increase efficiency, and save money. Blue Rhythm is commissioning and project management software by practitioners for practitioners, adapting to your workflows and processes, and doing things your way. Blue Rhythm provides painless and fast onboarding by bringing your existing workflows, forms, checklists, and issues logs into Blue Rhythm for you. You can use their pre-built templates to customize your commissioning workflows. And Blue Rhythm can fully handle the transition from your current software platform. Blue Rhythm is secure, scalable, and reliable, backed by amazing support, and accessible 24/7 on any Windows, iOS, or Android device. Why are you still using paper and hard-to-control spreadsheets? Start your free Blue Rhythm account today at bluerhythm.com.
And now, back to the show.
Adaptation, I think, is the word that's not used enough, right? This is why I have a problem with the tag of climate change. Climate is such a big, godlike event. If you think you can change that, I have a large bridge to sell you in London. If you're interested, call me, right? But what we can do is adapt and try and get ahead in the adaptation game, right? If we can see problems come in and the signals normally driven by cost, we can adapt, right? We've been hugely successful as a species adapting to things. But why do you think adaptation doesn't get spoken about as much?
It's probably seen as too costly, too difficult. It's easier to just do things the way we've always done it.
Yeah.
You build with your carbon and your steel, and you whack on MEP, your air conditioning units, and you want to have it really comfortable. We want one building, I'm not going to say which one because I might get it wrong, but there's one building in London where they increased the embodied carbon by 150% with the MEP system. Just they could be able to handle the 5 hottest days in the year. Right. It's like, can we not just be a little bit uncomfortable for those 5 days?
So what I'm saying is we're trying to make 21 degrees, 50% orange. And for 5 days a year, there's an exponential cost to deal with that, right?
Exactly. And that 21 degrees, that is modeled on a 40-year-old male. I'm sat in the office with slippers on, a shawl, an electric heater around my legs because I'm so cold. Because I'm not a 40-year-old male.
So I have to shed some light on this because I've been a member of SSPC 55 for now going on over 25 years. And so what the thermal comfort standard was actually designed around, for the US one, or the North American one, was designed around the European one, which is ISO 7730. And the research work that went into that actually included both males and females. So what oftentimes the standards get blamed as being, a gender issue dominated by males, but in fact, the standard doesn't deal with that at all. It basically says, and the Japanese figured this out, it's actually clothing policy. And it's like you said, Elisabeth, you're wearing a certain clothing value compared to your male, colleagues, and they have a different clothing that they're wearing. And what the Japanese did is they said, look, this is really stupid. We provide clothing restrictions. We force one of the genders to be operating in a space that's not comfortable. And of course, then the other one has to compensate, where if we make everybody be able to have an opportunity to adapt, wear the clothing that makes you comfortable, then you'll have more harmonization, thermal harmonization in the space. It allows you to raise the temperature and lower your energy. And it's not that complicated. So,
yeah, no, very good point, because it does seem unfair that I can wear a summer dress and some offices, the guys have to wear a suit and tie and a jacket.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think, but again, going back to Adam's question on adaptation, because adaptation, that's a big brush. We're talking about global adaptation. We're talking all the way through to personal adaptation, right? And it's easy and I think actually it was your founder that said, it was a seed that said, change will occur at the local level. Our ability to adapt will not happen in large government directives. It'll actually happen by the individual person or persons in a community who have said, we've had enough. Like, we have to stop doing what we're doing. I think he said that, didn't he, Adam? And
yes, that was Said's insight.
Yeah.
We could 7 years ago we interviewed him.
Holy cow, I can remember back 7 years.
Well done, mate. Not just that. But so that was Said's thing, right? Real change and adaptation happens at the local level. And his thing was, that's why municipalities actually are really important today, because they can set a standard that can move up, right? Because they're dealing with local issues, because they get the shortest feedback from people, right? If you're in Parliament, by the time the feedback's got to you, it's been distorted through different interest groups, right? Whereas if you're the mayor and people are banging on the door going, hey, what are we doing about this, right? It's a different thing. That's an interesting...
And there's a great example of that, and that, like in British Columbia, Canada. And I remember spending a little bit of time there working with BC Housing. And now when you read their documentation, they actually refer to, talking about thermal comfort, ASHRAE Standard 55. As far as I know, they're the only province in Canada at this point that has actually included the directives of Standard 55 in their guidance to builders at the home building level. But that happened because Wilma and her team, and Adam, that's something we're going to get Wilma on, said, you know what, like, we have people dying. Like, they had a heat spell and it was a couple of years ago and over 600 people died, right? And going back to adaptation, not most, but many of the buildings in Vancouver, for example, were designed at a time where adaptation worked. You could open up the window and you could get natural ventilation and natural cooling during the evening. But now with the changes that we have, that becomes less and less viable. And when you start thinking about, and again, this is kind of a rub against those that, promote natural ventilation, and that's it. Security issues, noise issues, air pollution issues. What's on the outside comes into the inside, right? That's what happens, and it happens very quickly. So not every community can use natural ventilation. So adaptation becomes a little bit more challenging as far as the building goes. Anyways, That was one of my soapboxes. I have many of them, Elizabeth.
And that's the end of Robert's TED Talk.
But you're right, and I agree with Sid when he said that change will happen at the local level, at the individual level, and it's really important. I think in giving people and municipalities agency to make those changes is huge, and I think that's what's actually going to fix the U.S. By the way.
So, from your point of view, you've come from there's a sort of what I see in your career, and sort of as you've moved through it, you've started off at a high resolution, there's a hole in the ground. Is that environmentally friendly? What's in it? And now you're sort of working at the building level, right? Which is a different level of resolution. How are you seeing the differences there, and how does that work for you as a professional?
Well, I mean, it was a bit of a shift. But I think going back to, I think you mentioned it earlier about sort of, it doesn't really matter what degree you do, because the most important thing you learn at university, I think, is how to acquire and apply knowledge.
Yeah.
So I think, having that wider environmental perspective helped me when I started focusing on building design. And I was kind of thrown in at the deep end when I did the switch, and I became BREEAM AP. So sitting very closely with the whole design team, figuring out how are we actually going to deliver. And it's a little bit different. So I was working in Norway at the time, and they looked at LEED and they looked at BREEAM, and they were deciding which one should we go for. And they decided to go with BREEAM because a lot of the Norwegian standards, they just take the British standard and they put an N in front of it. So it becomes NF. We were not quite as familiar with, like ASHRAE standards, although I do know them now because I'm on well AP.
Right.
But anyway, the Norwegian version of the BREEAM standard has a lot more embodied carbon and material focus in it. So how do we solve this? How do we actually deliver a building that is inherently sustainable? So I then had the opportunity, to work with the structural engineers and the architect and mechanical engineers to work this out. So it was a very steep, quick learning curve, to get me up to speed there. And then I could apply my previous knowledge to, well, how do I pragmatically focus them, onto what they need to deliver without them, brushing me off as, especially you get it a lot with, and I hope I don't offend anyone here, but with especially mechanical engineers who've been in the game for a while. And don't you come here and tell me how to do my job. I've been doing this for 40 years, and I said, well, there might be a different sustainability focus required here.
I'm glad you said that out now, because that's exactly right.
Totally.
Yeah. So,
Elisabeth, do you think that applies to, it applies to everybody, but do you think it applies to women more specifically? Like if a man came into a meeting like that and wanted to achieve the same thing that you wanted to achieve, and then you came in, is there a difference there that you believe in?
I think women probably have a bit more of a softer, I feel I'm stereotyping a lot here, but maybe a sort of more collaborative approach rather than just saying that this is how we're doing it, because I don't believe that is the right way. I don't want to dictate. I don't want to tell a guy who's been doing this for 40 years how to do his job, but I want to work with him. It's usually a him, but although there are a few female mechanical engineers, but I want us to find the solution together. So I probably do have a little bit of a different approach. I don't really feel that, because for years I felt like people asked me, do you feel that you're in a very, very male-oriented industry? Do you feel that you've been discriminated against? And I never felt it until I worked for a contractor. Really. So not with, not doing the research for British Gas, not working for consultancy, but contractor, it was a totally different ballgame. and the clients were vile. And I think that sort of pushed it to the back of my mind until the whole Me Too movement happened. And it was a bit like, oh yeah, oh my God. Because I remember telling younger women, and I feel ashamed that I did this now. I just told them that if you want to succeed in this industry, you just have to have really thick skin. You know, you're going to have people say the most wild things to you, catcalling. They're going to, treat you like
Right.
the secretary, and they're not going to listen to you, but you just need to have thick skin and just push through. And I kind of, I've changed my attitude to it since then, and I shouldn't have put up with it, but it was different. It was different back then. You know?
I mean, contracting is like Fight Club, and the first rule about Fight Club, you don't talk about Fight Club, right? It's just basically it is bare knuckle professional life, right? Is how I would describe contracting, and it is not for the meat or mile, but it is different now. I think my daughter works in the same profession that we do, and seeing her journey through her eyes is interesting for me. She has a mixture of the sort of thing you talked about, and then in other places she's just treated like one of the guys. It's really weird. There's this transition going on at the moment. I think that frankly, people who look like me sort of go away, and younger people come through.
Right.
Who come through university. I mean, women are dominating in university. That is going to move into the workplace, right? So this is going to sort of sort itself out. And I can sort of see the beginning of it in my daughter's work experiences, actually, where her colleagues are younger. Everyone was younger to me, obviously, but her colleagues are younger, and they're just not as badly behaved as their older colleagues, quite frankly. And I'm sort of optimistic on that. But, if you've got to go through and experience it, it's horrible.
It is. But I think it's, me being in the sort of environment and then sustainability part of the sector has always attracted more women anyway.
Yeah, that was the first sort of flood the zone type place.
Yeah. So it's been more, there has been more women, but I would say that there's been a severe lack of like role models for me to look up, so I do try to be that for others now. As much as
exactly what you are, by the way, you should accept that you are a role model now for people. Young people coming out need to be able to see someone to model themselves. And I think that's a really important factor in professional life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I have seen now that we're building the team in the UK and going through the sort of hiring process. I would say probably 90% of the good CVs that we get through come in are from women.
Agreed.
So, I might have to have a job to try and balance it the other way. Get some EDI male hires in my team.
There will come a day where there will be toxic women bullying dudes, and dudes will be going, "No, I'm bullying me." That's happening. That is going to happen. I promise you.
Yeah.
I'm here for that, by the way. I want that T-shirt. I want to see that move.
Well, we've had a number of women on the show before, Adam, talking about some of the stories that they've went through, and some of the deliberate roadblocks that have been put up in front of them. And I'm thinking about the young engineer from Mexico.
Yeah, just as soon as you said that, I remember that.
Yeah, and Elisabeth, just to share quickly the story. So her background was in controls, and she was working for a convention center, really. And so when a conference would come through or an entertainer would come through, it was her job to prepare the environment for a massive load of people to come in for a very short period of time. And the day before, that space would have been preconditioned, and then someone would come in at night and sabotage her control setup, so that the environmental conditions went to hell in a handbasket. So when the event occurred, she would take a whole bunch of sorry about the pun, but heat for this bad environment. And it was one guy that was sabotaging it. And it was like, how insecure are you that you would, sabotage someone's career because you can't deal with such like an issue like that? Like grow up.
That's threatened, totally threatened, right? But this we have to deal with, I think. And but that was a horrible example, but there is hazing in our business, right? My son's an apprentice electrician. They hazed the what's out of the first week. I knew what was going on. He wasn't quite sure. And I remember being hazed, and it is a thing, and that might go away actually as more women come through in the workforce, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find that there is a very supportive community, and I'm part of like there's this group in London called Ladies in Real Estate. I go to quite a lot of sort of women's only sport networking events, and it feels like a really safe and supportive environment. And I think women are very good at lifting each other up.
Yes,
and it doesn't feel competitive with other women. I think when we compete with males, we feel that we have to be, at least 100% better than them to be regarded on the same level. But I think that's probably just made us better.
Now, Margaret Thatcher, who's not a feminine icon, but she should be. She always used to be ridiculed, and reporters would look down on her, and they say, "What's it like to be the first prime minister? How did you do that?" She said, "I'm just better than the men around me." Her thing, and she meant it, and she was deadpan. She shut this dude down immediately. But her point was, just be awesome, right?
Yeah.
Just be better, and everything will work out. And she was right. She doesn't get the sort of kudos for that because she was obviously a hardline conservative, and that puts a lot of people off. But, as a feminist, I think she's an absolute feminist icon because she just pushed through, come what may, and just was objectively better than then. She dominated the political scene for 10 years simply because she dominated all the men around her, right? By being absolutely ruthless.
Yeah.
Right?
When I think about good leaders, they see past all of that shit. They look at for what is getting produced, what are the results, and if there's anybody that's in the way, if you're a good leader, you're gonna nip that in the bud.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And if you're not doing that, change your leadership skills because that's just cancerous.
I do want to circle back to BREEAM quickly. So BREEAM, for our international listeners, is the UK version of LEED. Is a very inaccurate way to describe it. It's a very different system, but BREEAM, well, this was a few years ago now when I was researching this, is the most successful, widely used green building certification system in the world that no one knows about. Because it's Brit run, it's the best kept secret in the world because Brits are horrible at advertising everything. Now, I know you're a Brit now, so congrats on that. But LEED, in the sort of markets I'm familiar with, LEED is the dominant thing. And LEED, I think, is a triumph of marketing over substance sometimes. Now, LEED version 5 is coming out. So what's your thoughts on BREEAM versus LEED and LEED version 5?
Well, I think LEED version 5, it has a bigger focus on decarbonisation, which I think BREEAM doesn't have yet.
Yeah.
There's that, and there's human health and well-being focus, and also ecological conservation. So there's a embodied carbon quantification prerequisite in LEED 5.
Wow.
So that's a big step forward, and BREEAM doesn't have that. So, which is why I think probably one of the reasons why they in the UK were developing it was launched almost a year ago, the UK Net Zero Carbon Building Standard.
Right.
So, so I have high hopes for the standard. It's not going to be mandatory, but it is going to encourage, I think, the bigger developments to obviously measure, report on, and reduce their embodied carbon. It would have been great if that was in the same certification as BREEAM, because I don't think there's a bit of a resistance to certification in the UK, and I don't think they can do too. Like in the Middle East, most of the projects, especially Saudi projects, they do Musterdam, LEED, and well.
Yeah.
They don't bat an eyelid, paying for in the UK, you barely get them to do one. Yeah. So, but I do have high hopes for the net zero building standard, that it will really help us drive that. Otherwise, we're not going to meet the 2050 net zero carbon target.
I've got no issue, no one is. But quickly, just to double click on that net zero building standard, I wasn't aware of that. I like that. So I mean, you're right. Brits, for some reason, resist certification. I don't know why. It's a cultural phenomenon I've not managed to get a handle on, but it's a thing. But the net zero building standard, how do you think that will come in? Do you think it will be optional, or do you think some local authorities will make it part of a building planning application?
They might, because some local authorities do have requirements for BREEAM certification. Not all. It would make it a lot easier if it was more universal. But I would imagine that the GLA, the Greater London Authority, would probably make it a requirement.
Right.
So what they say is, if say the top, the 40%, top best projects actually really deliver, they are pulling the weight for the rest.
Yeah.
And they have to, perform at a certain, very low embodied carbon level. But if you can get a wider uptake, then everyone can do a little bit worse. That if we all pull the load together, instead of, having some buildings with, maybe 250 kilograms of carbon per meter square, if everyone does it, maybe they could do, 450, which is more achievable and probably a bit more economical because you don't have to go down the really specialized materials route.
Right.
So like in Scandinavia, they're really far ahead, but there's so much timber frame there. And obviously, I don't know if it's still, a hang up from the Great Fire of London or whatever it is, but, there is more of a reluctance to use timber frame in the UK.
That is a cultural phenomenon in the UK. As a Brit, when I moved to Canada, I wanted a brick house. My dog lives in a wood house with a felt roof. Where I live, wood houses with felt roofs go for millions of dollars. It still blows my mind.
Yeah.
Housing is always and first a cultural phenomenon, right?
Yeah.
And culturally, telling a Brit he's going to live in a wood house is like telling him he's moving in with his dog in the garden. Not going to fly. Just give you a little bit of insight.
That is so true. I mean, when I think about Korea, Professor Kim there from the University of Seoul said somewhere around 90% of all buildings in Korea have underfloor heating.
Yeah.
And that's because that's the Ondol is their cultural, they embrace that cultural history of how they condition people in spaces. And Adam, as you know, here in North America, what is it, 5%, 3% people use, they're so driven on low cost, forced air, which I think you had said one time was the most barbaric way of conditioning people. But keep in mind that North America was evolved over, it was young people immigrating to this country. And from the day that they moved out of their original home, they've never stopped moving. And so why would they put money into a place that they were only going to stay for a couple of years? So that has driven our culture, but that's starting to change as the demographics have changed, where people are building their forever home. And we're seeing more of the higher quality housing coming, into the marketplace because people are settling down and they have the wherewithal to spend it.
When I grew up in the 70s and 80s, yes, old, only poor people had hot hair blown at them in their social housing. So when I came here and I said to my realtor, I want radiators on the wall, she laughed at me. She said, "You're not getting that. We might as well just stop this thing right now. You're never getting that here. You're going to get hot and cold air blown at you, whether you want it or not." And that was a hard truth. I had to get my head around. My dream was to build a house with radiant heating and cooling, and then ventilation system. Not going to happen. It's not going to. But actually,
I have a question for both of you with regards to BREEAM and WELL in general. And Adam, my philosophy. In fact, I trademarked it, was designed for people, good buildings will follow. WELL really speaks to meeting the needs of the occupants. And although LEED and BREEAM and these other ones, active house, passive house, do have a component, I get the impression that the building programs filter out the really good stuff that comes out of environmental standards, whether it's lighting standards, sound, thermal, air. Do we see programs like WELL changing the building property development where we're actually meeting more the needs of the occupants and putting that as a priority over energy and decarbonization?
Do you want me to answer first?
Yeah.
I think the really sort of the ones that want to be branded as for, I suppose, like, the Google HQs really, focus on the well-being aspects and the biophilia and the wellness areas, and the lighting. I think the first project I did in Norway with a well standard, and we looked at circadian lighting and all that. It freaked them out, the lighting designers. We can never do that, but I think they're getting their heads around it now, and they see that it can be done. It's not actually that hard. And yes, I do think that I don't think it will replace it, because we still need to have a carbon focus. But I think it's coming more and more to the forefront, and the sort of social value aspect of this as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know you work on well buildings. Do you see that getting traction, or is it a bit of a novelty?
Sorry, was that for me?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Sorry.
I think the majority of well certifications I see now at the moment is in the Middle East. It's coming a bit like, there's a lot going on in Scandinavia. Obviously, I've been after that market for 3 or 4 years now. The uptake in the UK has been a bit slow, but I think there is a shift towards, you have more discerning tenants, who want to have a better indoor climate. And I think even though we spend less time in the office, with the sort of hybrid working pattern, I think when we are in the office, we do want, to have a better environment.
Yeah. Elisabeth, there was, for many, many decades, people thought that, if we build an energy efficient, low carbon building, that you would have good indoor environmental quality, which over and over again is not the case. You really have to focus on, it's a deliberate intent to create a good environment, independent of the energy. And my experience, and maybe I just had special clients, was that when we focused on the occupants, that we ended up with good buildings. But I don't think that the reverse is true. But I still think that there's people who believe that if you build an energy efficient building, that you're going to get a good environment. Would you agree with that?
No, I totally agree with you. Having an energy efficient building does not really tell you how the indoor environment is going to be at all. Because I think one of the big negative things about certifications like LEED and BREEAM is, or at least BREEAM new construction, is that they stop the minute you hand over the building. That's it. BREEAM in use obviously does look at the in use part of it, but what I really like about the WELL certification is that you have to continuously monitor and report and make sure that the building is operated and used the way it was intended to, because you have a wonderful design and then the FM team come in and they operate it in a totally different way. And the energy use might be way above what the design said it would be.
Right. Yeah.
I like
the post occupancy evaluation and monitoring and reporting is crucial.
And I think that circular dialogue, coming back, that feedback is huge. And I believe, at least to some extent, the evolution of the post occupancy evaluation, which started back in the 60s, believe it or not, with analog studies, has driven to some degree our awareness of buildings. People haven't given the opportunity to say, like, the lighting here sucks and the sound is terrible, and and we're always we're freezing or it's stuffy or whatever. I think the ability for occupants to freely give that feedback without, risk of losing their job, has been hugely important to the world of architecture.
Biophilic design is, I think, one of the most underrated design concepts. Do you see any evidence of that, Elisabeth, coming through anywhere?
Yeah, I think I think it's almost been by accident as well, because people have said, oh, we like Scandinavian design.
Right.
Put some pine in and it feels Scandinavian. And we may not have understood why we like it, but it has a very calming effect, I find. Even just, because that's been a thing in Scandinavia as well. You might have a timber frame and then you think, oh, we're going to put some plasterboard to cover it. And it's like, no, why are we doing that? You're adding more materials, you're adding more carbon, and you're covering up the wonderful natural elements of it. So I think it's really important, especially since you spend so much time indoors. You have to have it. But now I think we're kind of having a greater understanding of it, so we can be more deliberate about it.
Thermal comfort, certification, biophilic. These are all advocating for the occupants, right? Who have been largely ignored until recently, I think. We build a building, and this is a delivery model, right? You build a building, you sell it, or you occupy it, and everyone sort of walks away.
Yeah.
And the occupants don't really get a say, and it's really hard for them to feed back. I mean, if it's a hotel, I guess they can just not check in, but generally, right? What do you do? I really think the user experience has to be brought forward.
Well, we had Bill Browning on the show.
Yeah, that was
I remember. Yeah, I don't remember what year that was, and I met Bill at an ASID, American Society of Interior Design conference, and was just blown away by his presentation. But Elisabeth, going back, and it actually ties into something you just said about Norwegian, but it's Scandic design. It's the Danish design. It's the Swedish. It's the Norwegians. You're right. Like, there's something about going into a space that has that sort of element. It's much softer. It's way more inviting. Like, when you think about some of the harsh architecture and harsh interior designs that exist in buildings, just there's so much rigidity, and the colors are cold and the materials are cold. But Scandic design is not like that at all. And when I think about Bill Browning and biophilic design, when you think about some of the projects that he's worked on, it's really soft. It's very comfortable, very open. And, Adam, you and I have been in restaurants that are like that, and they're just nice places to be.
Yeah, I mean, it ties in with, I don't know if you heard of they say it's Danish, but it's universally Scandinavian, Hygge, Hygge. So it actually means coziness. How can you increase the coziness factor and make the office also feel more like home? And I've been to a few architect studios in London that have they've mastered that bit, and I feel like I'm back in Scandinavia, when I've but it's just a really sort of cool place to be, and it must, inspire creativity and increase productivity, I think, when you are in spaces like that.
Yeah. What was that word again?
Hygge. So Hygge.
Hygge.
I think there's a book on it, even, like how to create Hygge.
I like that. See that? Well, beauty of this, we learn stuff.
Yeah, well, there's another word. It's called umwelt, and it's sort of the same sort of theme in that. And I wonder the Japanese have a word too, and I'm trying to remember what it was. Because I was giving a lecture somewhere, and this guy came up with the word written on the back of his card. It was in English, but of course, how they pronounce it was in a language that I don't communicate in. But I wonder if cultures all around the world have a specific word like that.
Yeah.
I don't think there's one in Canada. I mean, we use the word comfortable, but what does that mean?
Yeah, I think because for me, like Hygge, that for me is you're in a cabin, you've got a fire going, you're wearing your grandmother's woolen knitted sock, and you have a big glass of either hot chocolate or red wine, and some candles.
Yeah.
And you're surrounded by friends having that time. That's Hygge for me.
You know
That's
what?
great.
Yeah. If a Japanese guy came from Norway, that's what he would say, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I love that. That's quite the image you conjured up there. I love that. That's really cool. This is, again, comfort and housing is a local cultural phenomenon, right? You just described a cultural phenomenon from Scandinavian countries, right? I totally resonates. Everyone can put that in their head as an image and understand it. But you're right, Robert. What is the North American one? Comfort is the nearest.
Well, you know, you take
freaking beer. What is it?
Well, that's the thing. Like, Elizabeth, you take that, what you just described, you can't take that image and put it into a modern North American home because there's so much glass and it's just so, there's nothing warm about it at all.
Yeah.
Right. But when you provide that image, which is just romantic and it's just like you want to be there, you know, but you envision wood and you envision the warmth of the fire and the softness and the laughter of your friends, and the colors are very rustic and natural, right? But you can't have that image in North America. Like it's just so, I want to use a hygienic, but that's not the right word because hygiene is actually good, but it's so cold. Like it's just so industrial and institutionalized.
I like that. You've earned your thing today, Elizabeth. Teaching stuff.
Everybody wants to be in a space like that. I don't know anybody that wouldn't want to be in a space like that.
I'm sitting there thinking, my house is not like that.
But you know what? That goes back to like when you design for people. So like when you talk about fenestration systems, for example, the choice of glass, the glazing, the tinting, all of that can create the warmth colors we have in spaces, the natural warmth colors. But that doesn't, unless you're paying attention to that, you're going to get whatever that glass gives you. And that's, people don't have that dialogue, like on housing, for example, with their architect and their builder, you know, being able to sit as you described in a space and get those colors that might be coming from natural sunlight. That's an engineered solution. Like you're actually looking at the science of light as a form of, you know, visual light, but also heat, right? And what are the consequences of that coming into the space? Well, that's a deliberate, intentional decision that you're making. And I don't know if anybody or very few people go through that dialogue.
Yeah, I mean, it's just when I was studying to be a well AP, I was, you know, reading the manual and learning about the circadian lighting and all that. And I was in Barcelona in the Sagrada Familia. I don't know if you've been in and there it has the windows. The windows on the eastern side of the building are blue to capture sort of the morning light, and then on the western side they're all red. So,
I love that. That's responsive design.
I know, and that was like designed 150 years ago at least. Was it like beginning mid 1800s? I think they started on that.
No, I'm that old. I remember them starting it.
And we knew about it, you know. So it was great how you can integrate that into the design. But once I was aware of it, it was like so clever.
So
I laid biophilia because he laid the tree. The columns are shaped like trees inside, different types of trees and leaves. So he knew what it was all about.
What you've hit on there is something I've always sort of thought about, right? So that knowledge was known back then. How do we know that? Because it's been incorporated into the design, right? Yeah. So what you're seeing there is a design from 100, 150 years ago, right? And then when we got to the 60s, sort of certainly after the Second World War, and it was like the space age, the jet age, there was an arrogance as a society. We developed like, we can air condition that, we can control everything, right? And all that learned knowledge didn't sort of got thrown away, right? And this is what I think we're slowly doing now with your profession, Elizabeth. We're slowly rediscovering those things that you're talking about in Barcelona, right? That knowledge is in there. We just don't value it or don't embrace it anymore. So I'm starting to I'm going to start crying in them.
Yeah, we have to relearn, rediscover what we used to know.
Rediscover, that's the right word. Absolutely. There is so much we've let go. We got to rediscover and adapt and bring back. Boom. I nailed it. Adapt, bring back. Oh, that's the word, Sarah. That was. I've got one. Before we wrap up, I've got something else I want to ask you. I'm always fascinated by how people identify, right? So you started as a chemical engineer, you come back, go to Imperial College. Well done on that, by the way. So just so you know, everyone from outside the UK, Imperial College is Britain's MIT, just say it. Brainy. Just put it out there. So you go like chemical engineering, let's face it, chemical engineering, that's a hard one as well. Let's face it, that's not something you can get drunk every night in the student bar and pass. So you do chemical engineering, Imperial College. You're a chartered engineer. You're a chartered environmentalist. You're well certified. So you go into a room full of people. How do you identify? Are you an engineer? Are you a sustainability consultant? What is your tag?
And let's see. So I'm trying to move away from sustainability to regenerative. So I would say I'm a generative building design facilitator.
Cool, that's a bit of a mouthful though.
How about that?
Regenerative building design. All right, that might be the episode title. I think you've just given me the...
Yeah, right.
Yeah, because I found that, I'm becoming more and more of a, I suppose, generalist as I've been, more sort of managerial, I suppose. Yeah. And the key thing is that, I hire people that are a lot better than me at the individual specialisms.
That is the trick.
Yep.
I'm not the best specialist in any of these areas anymore, but I can see the big picture, and the holistic facilitation process is where I think I can add value.
Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%.
Yeah, it's what goes back to when we've talked about IDEO, it's pronounced the same way, which is an industrial design firm. I don't know if you're familiar with them, Elisabeth, but for example, they've worked with most of the big corporations around the world, Apple being one of them, when they were, working on how to design the mouse and the whole ergonomics of the mouse. But one of their philosophies is that when you design anything, you bring a broad spectrum of people to the table, and it doesn't matter. It could be the caretaker for the building, from a neuroscientist to a surgeon to whatever, and you bring all of these minds together, and each of them can contribute to the design of whatever it is that they're working on. And it's that collaborative effort. Actually, you talked about in terms of women versus men, well, not versus men, but the differences between the two. It's that ability to have specialists come to the table and recognize their value, and Adam, we've talked about before about arrogance,
the
operation.
Arrogance in everything we do is horrendous, actually. We lose touch with the sort of things that were going on in the Barcelona building, right? That knowledge that has just been lost to time, right? And yet it's still there. You can go and see it, right? So, I guess one of your powers, your superpowers is you can see that and know what it is.
Yeah.
I suggest you have a duty of care to communicate that to a wider audience and bring it back.
Yeah.
So no big work.
But that ability, again, go back to leadership, recognizing your strengths and weaknesses, and knowing when to bring people to the team that have those other areas, and they are the pieces of the puzzle. And I guess it might come with age. It's sooner or later you realize you're not the puzzle. You're just one of the pieces. And if you're
in the way normally,
you're in the way. And knowing when to get out of the way, that's another good leadership skill. Knowing when to get the hell out of the way. And I think Tom Peters talked about that many, many years ago. Like, you do exactly what you're doing, Elisabeth. Hire really good people and get the F out of the way and let them do their job.
We're coming up on time, so we'll do a couple of quick fire questions. This has been great, by the way, as well. I've really learned some stuff here. And I've been working with you 6 months. I didn't know half of this, so this is all great. So look, you are where you are now. Like, you're a professional. You've got accomplishments. If you could go back to Ohio, and speak to yourself again, what would you say? Would you give different advice, or would you say just enjoy the journey?
How far back?
Going back to the chemical engineering days.
I don't think I would change anything. Because it's all connected, and it's who I've met along the way as well, and how they have shaped me. I wouldn't have ended up in London and met my husband, my Scottish husband, and he's, rounded me in many ways. I'm a painfully shy introvert, but he has extroverted me in a way.
Hey, young lady, get out there.
So, no, I think if I changed anything, I might have ended up, completely. The only thing I might say is that because I love designing and creating clothes for myself. Right. So I might go way back and just, get into fashion design. Don't fashion industry at all.
So you're that rare thing, an engineer and sort of like consultant who's creative. Those are not normally things that sit alongside each other. That's interesting.
Yeah. My question has, and I've asked this question before, but it's really your answer. I know will be great advice for the students and those that are in school trying to figure out what they want to do with their life. And it has to do with courage and fear. You've made a lot of decisions that took you places, made you uncomfortable, and you've just pushed through it. And now you find yourself, in a career that you're loving. What words do you have for those that, have that fear and maybe haven't developed that sense of confidence or that sense of courage for them to make those big decisions? What words do you have for them?
Oh gosh. I think it probably doesn't, if you know, I suppose if you know what interests you and what makes you happy, it doesn't really matter, the job title. I think you'll end up where you're meant to be anyway, if you follow what interests you and that you feel passionate about. It's like my husband says that, one of my sons is really good at maths, and he said, oh, he should get into banking because then he'll be rich, he'll make loads of money. And it's like, well, if that doesn't make him happy, don't chase the title or the niche necessarily, but just generally, if you can figure out generally what you're interested in. So I knew that I was really interested in natural sciences. I loved physics, chemistry. I didn't love math, but it was fun. It was a tool to do the other. And it kind of took me in the general direction of where I ended up. So I don't think don't sweat the small stuff, I suppose. Try to do something that get in a direction of something that makes you happy and that you enjoy.
Yeah. I think learning to embrace the fear, like don't let it prevent you from doing the things that you love to do.
Yeah. And also I think what we said earlier is that it doesn't really matter what you studied unless it's something like, I suppose, mechanical engineering, which is quite technical, but it doesn't. What you learn, the most important thing that I learned at university was, like I said, how to acquire knowledge and how to more importantly how to apply it.
Yeah.
So I can very quickly look at a problem and figure out what the way to the solution is and who I need to bring in, to work it out. So yeah, just jump in with both feet.
Good advice. That's a great way to end the podcast.
No jump in. Glory.
Totally.
All right. Listen, thank you for coming on. That was awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Such a lot from that today, actually. I'm really concerned that I do not have coziness in my house. I've just realized. Looks like a serial killer lives where I live.
Well, you can always hire a Scandinavian to help you.
Scandinavian architect. That's a good takeaway. I need a Scandinavian architect and engineer to design my next house. That's cool. All right, look, thank you for coming on. That was awesome. Thanks very much.
The Edifice Complex will continue in just a moment.
Are you passionate about the built environment? Do you want to learn from the industry's most inspiring, intelligent, and accomplished professionals? Then the companion to this podcast, Wisdom of the Property Crowd, is just the book for you. From Edifice Complex podcast interviews, This book distills the critical thinking, insight, and ideas of some of the property industry's most accomplished and respected practitioners. Each chapter is a synopsis of an hour-plus interview, capturing the takeaways and insights, including diagrams and images, to help explain concepts and ideas. There's also a brief bio about the interviewee and a QR code linked to the podcast episode for those that want to explore further. These are the mentors you wish you had in college. Wisdom of the Property Crowd by Adam Muggleton. Available on Amazon worldwide.
And now, back to the show.
Hygge,
Hygge.
right? Hygge, is that how that's pronounced?
I think
Hygge.
so. I'm going to be Googling it again.
Wow, that's when Elizabeth was describing that environment, like I wanted to be there.
It's saying lovely.
You know, like there's just some people that can, A, have the words to be able to describe that environment, and then B, to be able to draw people in going, hey, I want to be there. And wouldn't that be great if we could have that in all environments that we design? You know?
I mean, we were talking about during an episode of how the occupants are not really part of the conversation in building design. And that sort of embodies that thing in one word, right?
It does.
That word.
Yeah.
That's the IEQ, IAQ, the thermal comfort, the whole biophilic feeling, right? It's in that one word. We got to try and promote that as a design concept somehow.
Yeah, well, and then you picked up on, you know, when you asked her a great question, you know, how do you tag yourself? Like, how do you identify? And she used the word regenerative, and I love that. And you know, we've like the words in our industry lose meaning really quickly. Like green means nothing anymore. Sustainability is on its way out. I thought that the last word available to us was stewardship. I always thought that earth stewardship kind of described it all. But the word regenerative has power in it. I like that word.
I like that. And also it's already been taken up by like the farming community. Like there's a thing called regenerative. Well, there's a few near us and we try and shop in the farm shops there.
Yeah.
So there's a whole super commitment to like using minimal chemicals or none, right? You know, it's more than organic. It's about the whole farming cycle, not just like, did I give that chicken antibiotics?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's actually quite a concept. It's really freaking hard to do. If you're a farmer doing that, you've made your life about 5 times more difficult than it needs to be.
Well, you have. Yeah. Well, and far harder to manage. The logistics are much greater.
Yeah.
Everything from just crop choices to rotating crops to all, and then all, of course, even the nutrients in the soils and everything, water, sources of water, like you just go through the list, all the things you have to be concerned about, you know?
But that concept there, regenerative farming, that's the same as what we were talking about, where all these tips and tricks that we used to know, like the shading, the biophilic design, sort of went away in the sort of Gen Age where we were so, as a culture, arrogant. We can control anything. We can burn fuel. We can give you 21 degrees plus or minus 1 degree. You know, there was an arrogance to that. It was a great optimistic time, that sort of 60s post-war era.
Yeah, true.
There was an arrogance with it that meant we lost touch with all that. We lost our humility and we lost touch with all the old design principles.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden we felt we could control the environment exactly as we wanted, right?
Yeah. That's where I like Professor Susan Rolfe, and you know, we'll try to get her on if she has time. But you know, her and her colleagues and the whole study of vernacular architecture, and you know, and she's spearheading, you know, extreme climates at the extreme. Sorry, climates at the extreme. You know, where she brings together all of these people that have to deal with changing climates and the extremity that's causing death, like and the illnesses. Like we're faced with some serious stuff here, whether you believe it or not. For those that deny it, but vernacular architecture, what we learned in the past, is actually a survival form. That's what allowed people to live in those climates. It was a survival
adaptation
form
as well. Good, we're really
totally
right. It's it's cumulative adaptation, right?
Yeah.
Which is why if you look back at old photos of New York City 100 years ago, all the windows had big blinds on, right?
Yeah. Totally.
You know, that's an adaptive solution to a problem.
Yeah. And you know, and again, like I have to be careful. Well, we should, to some degree, want to be careful with the words we use here, but there's a level of illiteracy and naivety with people that have never traveled, have never seen architecture from another world that has survived thousands of years. I mean, Adam, you've been to so many countries around the world, but when you think about the Middle East, that you've spent a lot of time in Dubai, Oman, and Egypt, and you look at the old buildings, Iran, Afghanistan, like these are old cultures, and their buildings still survive, and the logic that they used back then is serving them today. And North Americans, like, we missed the boat completely on, staying to the roots of vernacular design. And you're right, air conditioning has screwed us up, like it has.
We lost our humility at that point. But there's one question you always ask yourself, right? There's a lot of iconic buildings out there. Burj Khalifa, this skyscraper. How many of them are going to be around in 200 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, well, there's going to be a lot of buildings coming down.
that we all revere that have been around for hundreds of years. Right?
Yeah.
So that's the question. There is signature architecture out there and signature buildings.
Yeah.
What's the longevity of it? I don't know.
Yeah.
That's that's the immortality if you're an architect, I guess.
Yeah. One of the things I love about these interviews we get to do is our own brains, right? We get to go to those corners and ask questions about the interview and what thoughts is it triggers. And then one of the other things has to do with what is the messages that we're leaving behind. And we usually do that, messages. And again, we've had so many people on the show, that had to make decisions where they had to uproot themselves. They had to go from one country to another. They left their family. They left their friends. They went to a strange place.
Yeah.
And survived. And Elisabeth, again, she's another representation of that ability to embrace the journey.
And Elisabeth is walking, talking evidence of one of my theories in life. Everything's a zigzag. There's no straight lines. You zigzag where you're going.
Yeah.
And she's done that completely and succeeded at every turn, right?
Yeah.
Now, if you'd have gone to the young Elisabeth where she's staring into a hole in the ground trying to what's it? It's like you're going to be doing that 20 years from now. You'll be living in this country doing X, Y, Z. She'll get out of it. I'm a chemical engineer,
Yeah.
So yeah, you got to, this is what the thing, things you think are a big deal when you're young, like, I've just done a 40 degree and I don't like it. There's a move to get away from that without throwing it away completely, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. In theory, she should be in a lab, creating pacemakers or, doing chemical engineering in a white coat. That's not what she did.
Yeah.
Right? And she's still got value out of that degree.
Yeah. So I think, again, for those that are listening, if you're in school or you're looking at a career change, embrace it. Like, just, but getting frozen in time because you're afraid to do something, like, that's the worst thing that you can do. Just, you'll make it through, you'll survive, and you might find yourself in places that are amazing. Absolutely. Yeah.
Always going. So let's finish on this. Engineering in general and the built environment in general is an interesting career, and there are 100 different ways to have a great career. And
yeah, totally.
Yeah. Well, man, see you on the next one.
All right, Adam. Cheers, man.
You've been listening to the Edifice Complex podcast with Adam Muggleton and Robert Bean. To access show notes for this episode, visit edificecomplexpodcast.com. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a review on iTunes. See you next time.